the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
2,000 years after his death, 1/3 of the world views Jesus not only as their God and Savior, but as the leader to whom they have committed their lives. It is an incomprehensible legacy of leadership. So the question is, how did he do it? How did he establish such a legacy? And what can we learn from his example?
That is the voice of our guest, Dr. Joseph McInerney, and he is the voice and the writer of this beautiful, beautiful series recently released from our friends at the wonderful Knights of Columbus. He's also the Vice President of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights. And this series, the trailer looks amazing. We'll put a link to everything on our archive section. Just a little background about Dr. Joe. As we mentioned, VP of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights. Of course, we don't have to explain who the Knights are because they're so incredible. But just in case maybe you're a new Catholic, they're a worldwide fraternal association and more than 2 million members who do incredible work in our communities and in our churches. Now, prior to retiring as a captain from the Navy, he served as a chair of the Department of Leadership, Ethics, and Law and as permanent military professor of applied ethics and leadership at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. Now, I could go on because it has a very long and prestigious resume, but Dr. Joe, for the sake of time and so we can talk about this beautiful series, I will skip the rest of your resume if you don't mind. But thank you for joining us. Happy Advent, and thank you for this series. So tell us about it.
Well, thank you, Teresa, for the kind words and the kind intro. I'm sure my family they've heard enough of that stuff anyway, so I'm glad to keep it short. And thanks for speaking with me today. The series is a series of 8 videos. They're relatively short, 8 to 10 minutes long, and what the purpose that they serve is to help educate our members in how to lead well. What we want to do is focus our efforts to develop leaders on Jesus Christ and the virtues that make the leaders great. So it's a Christ-centered and virtue-based approach to leadership. So we start, actually the first video, we start talking about Christ as an exemplar of leadership. And it's interesting because the world does not recognize Jesus Christ as an eminent leader typically. And so we want to say this is why we should. And then from there we talk about virtues, which is a bit different than modern moral approaches to ethics and morality, and then from there we hit on virtues we understand as, to put it simply, morally excellent habits. So from there we hit three fundamental moral habits that are necessary to leadership. The first for every Christian is prayer. Prayer gives us access to the grace that enables us to overcome our sin and become the people God wants us to be. And then we hit on 2 unique virtues: magnanimity, which is an ability to recognize your God-given talents and do great things on the basis of that knowledge. And then the second one that is paired with magnanimity is humility. And simply put, that's an ability to recognize our weaknesses, which is also crucial to leadership. So that's a very quick overview of what we try to dive into in the videos.
The intro to it was, I think, it was really helpful because they really kind of summarized it in the trailer. And what's so amazing to me is if you think about how quickly Christianity grew despite all the persecution. I think maybe the persecution probably, the blood of the martyrs is a fruit of the church. But it is incredible when you think about the tools that were used by the apostles and in the Acts of the Apostles and how it grew and the different lives of the saints, over the centuries. It's so incredible, and Jesus was such a great, and I work as a motivational speaker in addition to a talk show host, and I'm sure you do too. The way he approached people, he was able to use analogies, able to reach people. You would think more people would look to him considering what happened with Christianity after the resurrection. Talking with Dr. Joseph McInerney, and he is a Vice President of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights of Columbus, and he is also the writer and the host of the Leadership Virtue Series. I'll make sure we give you the link on our archive section so you can check this out yourself. It's called the Leadership Virtue Series. And Doctor, in terms of the lessons, it's so important for us to hear this, but why right now do you think is it even more important, this series?
Well, if you look out in American culture right now, and obviously we just went through an election, and there's all kinds of controversy, but one of the things that public polling has showed for the last few decades is that trust in Americans' leaders is actually going down. And this is true of all institutions. Pew's polling shows it, Gallup's polling shows it. And what's also fascinating, and this is exactly happening at the same time that the leadership education industry, the industry that should be supporting our leaders and making them more effective, has come into its own. In the 70s at Harvard Business School, a distinction was made between management and leadership became the thing to pursue. And billions of dollars a year are spent on leadership education in the United States right now, and we don't seem to be getting a lot out of it. And I think part of the reason for that, and it's a complex situation, but part of the reason for that is that we don't understand morality and ethics very well in our culture. And that is, morality and ethics, especially the virtues, is fundamental to successful leadership. And so that's what the series is attempting to hit, is how do we become people or how do we develop the moral characteristics that enable people to trust us so that we can lead them?
And the series was just released quite recently, correct?
That's right. We released it in mid-October, actually. October 17th, I think, is when it drops. And so we're hoping that it can be a resource for as many people as possible.
Let's talk a little bit about why this is being so well received, because one of the points that was made in the trailer, which really struck me and gave me the chills, you were talking about that what Jesus did really at the end of the day, it really is all about love. And I think sometimes we forget that. Not that we don't love people, but we think when we think of leadership, or we think of how are we going to evangelize someone, maybe we want to educate them in the faith. But at the end of the day, it really is about first building relationships as Jesus did and loving them, right?
Right, absolutely. That's a hard question. That's a very deep pool that you just opened up for us to try and answer it succinctly. But in leadership education circles, you see a focus on servant leadership, which is great. It's obviously, like if you read the synoptic gospels, Jesus turns leadership on its head and says, if you want to be great, you need to serve. But I think even underneath that, the desire to serve is inspired and motivated by love. To be a servant leader is really the tip of leadership execution, because it's so hard to serve others. We want to serve ourselves first. And so love is that turn away from self-service to service to others. But you're absolutely, and this is what Jesus demonstrates in the Gospels, is that he talks about it and then he does it. And that's in the integration between what he says and what he does, I think is one of the powerful factors in his ability to attract followers to himself.
When you're talking about leadership, and you're talking about it in the family, you're talking about it in the workplace, you're covering different areas of leadership and how it can be applied in this series?
Absolutely. I think, one of the nice things about approaching things through Christ and through the virtues is that it's really based on human nature. So it's applicable in any area where you have relationships with other people. And for Christians, the reality is that if you're called to follow Christ, he's calling you to be not only a disciple, but to be a leader. And this is what he said to the disciples, and his first public statement is, "Or follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." So this is fundamental to our identity as followers of Jesus Christ, and it can hit every relationship, whether you're dealing with a child, whether you're dealing with a spouse, whether you're in a community organization, at work, in your parish, any relationship, even relationships where you're the junior person looking up to a leader, you still can exert leadership influence, and hopefully that's through the means of love and loving self-service, so to speak. So yeah, it's broadly applicable.
So with that in mind, obviously you mentioned this is really first and foremost for the membership of the Knights of Columbus, which has a huge impact at the parish level. But I would love to see people using this as maybe their own kind of study, because it's so beautifully done. And these are important, these are issues that we all have to address, and these are important gifts that we all need to embrace. Absolutely.
And to be honest, Teresa, we've only hit the tip of the iceberg. Magnanimity and humility are this nice pair of virtues that are really important to leadership. But, just to make a quick point, we need to do more work, because the cardinal virtues prudence and justice and temperance and fortitude, and then the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. They're all crucial to leadership, and they're all crucial to our own sanctification. One of the ideas in the series is that if we can become good people, that'll get us 75% of the way to being good leaders. You know, you still need some skills on top of that, which we talk about in the videos, but becoming a person that other people are willing to trust is fundamentally important. So that's part of the focus of the videos.
Talking with Dr. Joseph McInerney from the Leadership Virtue Series. He's the Vice President of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights of Columbus. So with this in mind and all the great lessons in this first series, you see a series of series, not to be redundant, but you know, this could be the first of many in terms of everything that you just mentioned.
It could be, and we'll have to see how things develop and how audiences respond to the virtues. But absolutely, to be honest, I think what's interesting is that I've seen work in leadership circles focused on the cardinal virtues, which is fantastic. It's great. But what I think is even more fundamental to leadership is the theological virtues, in particular the virtue of charity, which is, you know, charity is based on the Latin word caritas, which refers to the love of God and love for God. So this is the highest level of ethics, so to speak, is the law of love, St. Paul tells us, and what's demonstrated by Jesus in the Gospels too. So we would love to do more work in this area where we focus on more explicitly on how charity as a desire for the good and charity that reaches its heights in sacrificial suffering for the good of others is fundamentally important to leadership.
And let me ask you a personal question, because you have such a different, a unique background in the military leadership that you had and the way you served for our country, but also being so involved in the faith in the Knights of Columbus. What led you to get more involved in a faith perspective, Doctor, in terms of teaching in the way you are now with the Knights of Columbus and the other work you're doing?
Well, to put it succinctly, it was my mom. my mom forced me into it. No, she didn't. Well, actually, it was a little.
She prayed you into it. She probably prayed you into it.
She prayed me into it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little St. Monica going on here.
I was going to say, yeah.
But so it's interesting. And not to give you too much of a long story, but I was a person as a college student, and after college, I never left the faith, but I kept it at a distance because it was demanding things that I didn't want to give. And so when I got engaged, my mom thought, you need to engage your faith. And eventually I followed her lead and read some books that she basically, told me I needed to read, and it opened up an intellectual engagement with the faith that I've been pursuing ever since for the last 30 some odd years. So it really,
that a smart mama.
I mean,
yep.
Yeah, they had laid, my mom and dad had laid that foundation, but it became explicit when I was in my early 20s, when I was actually at sea on ships. So I was showing strange signs, reading John Paul II and St. Thomas Aquinas, and not understanding anything that I read, but I was very, very excited to get into this stuff at that point too.
Well, we are sure glad you did, and I bet, we don't have time for you to answer this question, but I bet, as my father used to tell me, because I told you he was in the Merchant Marines for many years and sailed the seven seas, sailed around the world, and he always felt close to God out on the ocean. He said it made him appreciate his faith even more, because you look out and you could be on this giant ship and it's like a toy boat in the bathtub, and you realize the depth of God's creativity, his creation, but also the depth of the Catholic faith. Doctor, thank you so much for this beautiful series. And before we let you go, remind our listeners where they can tap into it.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. And you can tap into this at www.kofc.org/virtues.
Awesome. Dr. Joseph McInerney, VP of Leadership and Ethics Education for the Knights, on this beautiful new series, Leadership Virtue Series.
You're listening to the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
Thanks for listening to EWTN, this program, Catholic Connection. If you're a new listener, welcome on board. It's co-produced by EWTN out of Irondale, Alabama, and Ave Maria Radio out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Beautiful new book, hot off the presses from our friends at Ignatius Press, Life-Giving Wounds, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce and Separation. It's co-authored by Dr. Daniel Meola and Bethany Daniel's under the weather like many of us have been or are right now with all these different things going around. Hopefully he'll heal very quickly. But Bethany joins us. Just a little background about the book. Some interesting numbers. Over half of the people in the U.S. experiencing the splitting up of their parents, the statistics say, yet no matter how, quote-unquote, normal divorce becomes, it always inflicts a profound wound on families, not just the parents, but the children, whether young or grown. The children of divorce are fractured on the level of their very being, heart, mind, and soul. If left unattended, this break could pain them for the rest of their lives, impacting relationships, their relationship with God and with each other here on earth, and, of course, their capacity for joy. A very important book. Bethany, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Teresa. Glad to be with you.
All right, so tell us about the birth of this book in terms of how you and your husband decided this needed to be put out there, first of all.
Sure. So we founded a ministry called Life-Giving Wounds, partly because that is my husband's background. He is an adult child of divorce, so he's one of those millions of people out there who experience the split of their parents. For him, that happened when he was a kid, and then it was finalized, the divorce was finalized the year that we got married, and then it became, something that we deal with as a couple. And we really saw a need in church for talking to the particular challenges that adult children of divorce face. We know there are very worthwhile and needed ministries for parents who go through divorce themselves, but we didn't see anything for the children. So we founded Life-Giving Wounds. We do retreats, support groups. We have a lot of online resources. And then we felt it on our hearts that we want to put something out there that someone can pick up, can pull off their bookshelf and read and, see their experiences in there and find the support and encouragement that our Lord has to offer for anyone who's gone through that really painful experience. We wrote this book. It just came out.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to, when you see the title, you think life-giving wounds, and you say, well, how can wounds be life-giving? But actually, the suffering we go through, if we give it to God, not only can we use it to help other people, as you and your husband are doing, but it's a growth situation for us if we allow it to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. We take very seriously the Christian doctrine of redemptive suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That informs a lot of what we do in our ministry, and it informs the book, throughout the entire book. We really reflect deeply on how going into those really dark and scary and hurtful places in our lives, even though it's really hard to do, Jesus meets us there, and he's not going to leave us there. He helps us grieve. We can grieve with him, acknowledge the pain, but then he helps transform that. And we see that after the resurrection when he appeared to his apostles with his wounds.
Mm-hmm.
But his wounds have been transformed. They're now a witness to greater faith, hope, and joy. So we want that for everyone. How did
the divorce affect not only your husband, but also your marriage? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, that's a great question. As anyone who gets married knows, you're joining two families.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got married, we took on a lot of the, both the good and the bad of both of our families. We had to navigate, Dan's family is still split up. Divorce is a lifelong wound. So we have to deal with that every time that we travel to see his family, milestones, our kids' births and baptisms, all of those moments we take on as a couple to navigate those feelings that come up, the difficulties. We know that's something that adult children of divorce have to face throughout their lives. So it's not something that it's going to go away, but it's something that we want to deal with greater peace and love as a couple.
We're talking with Bethany Meola. She's a co-author of a book with her husband, Dr. Daniel Meola, Life-Giving Wounds, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce and Separation, published by our friends at Ignatius Press. What damage do you think that society has done in making it seem like, abortion, or excuse me, not abortion, but abortion too, but in this case, divorce, is normal, as your overview of the book says? Lots of people get divorced, kids will get over it, no big deal.
Yes. Well, one thing is it feeds into what we call a wound of silence. So a lot of adult children of divorce, they may feel like they can't talk about their pain. They may have received a lot of divorce happy talk. This was for the best. Like, isn't this great? Now you have 2 Christmases. You have 2 families. All of these messages that a lot of children can receive, and adults, that it was okay. It wasn't that bad. That can make it really hard to be able to talk about their pain and even to find people that can receive that wound. So I think the fact that over half of adults in America today have experienced this difficulty it makes it really hard to conceptualize that that's a lot of people that are hurting. That's a lot of people that have been wounded. It can be kind of easy to turn a blind eye, like, oh, that can't possibly, be as bad. I think one thing we're trying to do is to raise awareness that, yes, there are a lot of folks walking around wounded, in need of Jesus' love and healing for those broken places in their hearts.
Does it matter if the divorce happens when children are younger or older when they're in college, or maybe a little bit more settled? What's the difference in terms of the impact of divorce, or doesn't it matter?
It's always difficult. We see people in our ministry, everything from they never knew their parents together to their parents divorced when, the children were already grown. It's always difficult. There's no point in time when you don't desire your parents to be together and to have their union be a stable one. Those who have experienced what's called gray divorce, whose parents divorced later in life, sometimes they're given the message, oh, this should not be a big deal. You're out of the house. You have your own family. It's still really hard. It's hard to see your parents split up at any point. And it also just raises a lot of really practical complications as your parents get older and they don't have each other to support each other. And all the things that children of divorce have to deal with. It doesn't matter. There's differences, but it's still a common pain and a common wound.
In terms of the book, how do you go through this? I know the book is hot off the presses, but kind of walk us through before we take a break, and then we'll pick it up after the break. We're talking with Bethany Meola, who co-authored a beautiful book with her husband, Dr. Daniel Meola, and the cover is stunning, too, Christ with His Wounds After the Resurrection. Life-Giving Wounds is the title of the book, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce or Separation. So do you share your story, your husband's story in the beginning of the book?
Yeah, we weave our stories in throughout, especially Dan's story as an adult child of divorce. In the book, we break down a number of wounds that a lot of adult children of divorce experience. The wound of silence, the wound to faith, wound to relationships, to identity. And after each of those chapters where we're looking at, here's the hard thing that you may have experienced if your parents split up. Then we look at ways that Jesus can come into that wound and help make it life-giving. Where does Jesus and our church and our faith give us that strength and support, that truth that we need to grow in faith, hope, and love through these wounds? And we conclude the book with a really deep dive into redemptive suffering. What does it mean to suffer well? What resources does our faith give us when we're facing these really difficult challenges that may never be fixed in this life?
What if there's a case, and this is a question, and we could pick it up. We have about a minute left, so if you hear the music, musical chairs, we'll have to stop and sit down. But what about the cases where you have really abusive relationships, and the church does not expect people to stay in those, especially if we're talking about physical and emotional abuse, if there's no chance of the other partner willing to get a healing and that kind of a situation. That can, be pretty daunting. You can't stay in that situation, but at the same time, you hate to see the marriage end. But there are some cases where that may be the only option. Is there a difference in terms of the hurt on the part of the children in those situations, or is it worse, less? What do you think?
Yes, as you said, church is very clear in canon law and the catechism that if it's a situation where there's physical danger, where there's serious harm, spouses are not expected to stay in really dangerous situations, and separation is licit in those situations. Civil divorce could also be licit if that's needed. The catechism is really clear about that. What we try to do is emphasize that for those cases, there's two major wounds happening. There's the trauma of going through a dangerous, violent family, and then there's also the trauma of seeing your parents not being able to figure it out. So we really lean into that and say it's not one's worse or one's better. They're both difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. More with Bethany Meola on the book Life-Giving Wounds from Ignatius Press, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce or Separation. We'll also give you their website. They do this ministry on a regular basis. If you want to bring them to your parish or diocese, sounds like a great topic, a very important one for a retreat or a presentation. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the best of Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo.
28 minutes past the hour, a new book from Ignatius Press. Our guest is Bethany Meola, co-wrote the book with her husband, Dr. Daniel Meola. The title, Life-Giving Wounds, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce or Separation. We were chatting during the break, and there was a new book that came out, I think it was very recently, in the last couple of months, about the fact that there's so much evidence, that I know you have some of this research in your own book, for a two-parent household, mother and father, and the impact that has when there isn't that relationship present for children. It's interesting, isn't it, in such a secularized, over-sexualized culture that the secular research shows exactly what the natural law and church teaching supports. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to avoid the just seeing the impact that when a person does not have their mom and dad together in the home, for their whole lives. There's serious impacts. There's emotional impacts, financial impacts. The children are more likely to get into risky behavior. I mean, you could just go down the list. That research definitely emphasizes the advantages that children have when their mom and dad can stay together for their whole lives.
Mm. So tell us about your workshops, and you have a workbook that you're working on as well, correct?
Yes, so there's a workbook that goes along with the book because we want this book to be something that people can pick up and really get a lot out of for wherever they are on their own healing journey. So if you go to our website, lifegivingwounds.org, you can also get the workbook that kind of breaks down the chapters, gives a lot of reflection questions, exercises. We're going to be piloting that in small groups and support groups coming in 2024.
So is this something that they can do on their own, or do you and your husband lead them, or is it a combination of both?
It could be either. The book and workbook is really intended to be used by individuals. Sometimes people are more comfortable with that. Maybe they're just starting to look at these situations in their own life, want to sit down in their own privacy of their home, or maybe go to adoration and work through the book. But we're also going to be doing small groups. We've seen so much benefit from bringing people together who are adult children of divorce, being able to meet, to talk, to share, to support each other. So we'll continue doing that. We have a full schedule of retreats through 2024, and then we'll be adding support groups throughout that time as well.
Okay, so how do people find you if they want you to do a retreat in their location?
Just come to our website, lifegivingwounds.org. It's easy to get in contact with us personally, myself and Dan personally, through the website. And you can also see the full schedule. We're coast to coast starting this weekend. We'll be in Kansas City and then have a full schedule of retreats really into the fall of 2024 already.
So there still is a huge need for this, obviously. How do you think the church is doing in terms of parishes, diocesan levels? How do you think we're doing in approaching this topic?
So we have seen a tremendous growth and openness to talking about healing as a topic, to talking about the woundedness that needs to be healed, the people in our parishes. We're seeing a lot of beautiful openness to that. We're getting a lot of interest in what we're doing, which I think is a beautiful sign. We've had no problem scheduling our retreats and working with dioceses. There's certainly room to grow. I mean, just given the sheer number of people that need the support and this help. The harvest is plentiful, but there are more and more people stepping up and saying, yes, I want to address this and I want to be part of the solution.
So is this a lifelong process, do you think, Bethany?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I said before, divorce is a lifelong wound. It's something that an adult child of divorce is going to deal with in various ways throughout their lifespan. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a lifelong, terrible thing. We've seen so many beautiful instances of people through God's grace being able to face those challenges with just a greater depth of peace, with joy, with having better, healthy boundaries, with so many ways that even if the wound remains, our hearts can grow bigger and the Lord can give us the strength that we need to face it in a better way.
What keeps you going? Because this is hard work. This is draining. This is not a pleasant topic. It's a needed topic. But what keeps you and your husband going and your family? Because I'm sure you hear a lot of really sad stories.
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's impossible to describe kind of the sadness that comes from hearing what people have gone through. It's very eye-opening. It's very sad. What keeps us going? I mean, the grace of God, first of all, praise God, the Holy Spirit. But yeah, when we meet people who are engaged in saying, Lord, I want this healing for these places in my heart that are wounded, it is incredibly inspirational to see the courage of people who have been given a really, have been dealt a really poor hand in life in a lot of ways and are willing to say, Lord, I am ready to take that step forward toward healing. That's very inspirational, and we can there's so many beautiful stories that have come out of the work that we're doing for people that have just felt the courage to say yes to relationships where there was a tremendous fear before, people who have been able to pursue forgiveness, understand more like what is the Christian meaning of forgiveness, and just finding greater peace in their lives. It's been amazing to see. So it's a privilege to do this work that we're doing.
Such an important opportunity to offer this to people. Life-Giving Wounds, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce or Separation, talking with the co-author, Bethany Meola, who wrote this with her husband, Dr. Daniel Meola. So in terms of the relationships with the parents who are divorced and the children of divorce, do these retreats and the book, it's designed to really help that relationship as well, because there has to be, I'm sure, along with the pain, a lot of tension still in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly we talk a lot about, what is forgiveness? Where are you in that process? We kind of distinguish a lot between forgiveness and reconciliation. Not every divorced parent, is really going to be ready to have the kind of relationship that a child might desire. So we do talk a lot about, what does that look like when your parent is not able to give you the love that you're really desiring. And we do talk about boundaries. There's a real, there's a solid sense of healthy boundaries that are important. That doesn't mean not loving your parents. You can have boundaries while loving someone. So those are certainly topics that are on a lot of people's hearts, because children love their parents. They want to love them. They want to honor them. But that gets really difficult in situations where parents may not have, lived up to their calling as a parent or have done really hurtful things. So we absolutely talk about that.
Yeah, that was another question, too, not to be a Debbie Downer, but are parents open when they hear their children go into these types of retreats to talk about this?
It really depends. I was just talking with somebody who was able to sit down with his mom and say, hey, I went on this retreat. These are some things that I learned, and the mom was in a place where she was really open to receive that. Other people may not feel comfortable, yet telling their parents that they're pursuing this. And everything in between. It depends a lot on what was the parents' involvement in the divorce. Did they even want it? There's plenty of divorced people out there who were also victims.
Right, and they didn't want to get divorced necessarily
exactly.
either, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very different scenario, and those parents tend to be very supportive of their children seeking healing because they didn't want this for their children. There's, any number of scenarios depending on what that relationship is and the parents' openness to this type of conversation.
Any chance that maybe in the future you'll be doing one for both the parents and the children together, regardless of their age? Is that a possibility, you think, or something you're thinking about?
That's not something that we envision at this point. One of our goals is creating a space where the children of divorce can have complete openness and freedom to be honest. Yeah. So that's not the work that we're doing. That's absolutely crucial work to help those who have gone through a divorce themselves. But our niche, our focus is for the children and everything that they've gone through.
What are the youngest and what would the age and guideline, or does it matter?
It's 18 up, so we help the adults. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Great book, and what a great service you're providing. Bethany Meola and Dr. Daniel Meola wrote this book, Life-Giving Wounds, A Catholic Guide to Healing for Adult Children of Divorce or Separation. We'll be right back. Minutes past the hour. Welcome back, Catholic Connection, on a Tuesday morning, the day after the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and talking life and health care and all that stuff with someone who's actually at the inauguration yesterday, our good friend Louis Brown, director of the Christ Medicus Foundation. Louis, I don't know if you heard, but we just had 2 segments with someone I know that you know well and appreciate his work, John Birch from Alliance Defending Freedom, giving his take on especially the executive order regarding gender ideology that happened yesterday with the president. Your thoughts this morning on where we stand now and things that we need to work on with this new administration. Thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yesterday I thought was a great day. We had inauguration tickets right in front of the reflecting pool. With the inauguration being moved indoors, wasn't able to be in the U.S. Capitol, wound up watching the ceremonies at the Heritage Foundation, but it was just a wonderful, joyful atmosphere around town yesterday, and it was really wonderful to see. I'm really excited about the things that are going to be done and that already have been done in this administration, Teresa. I think when the president yesterday said that it is the policy of the United States federal government that there are only two sexes, that is enormous. It's enormous for the biological scientific reality of science. It's enormous for the biological scientific reality of men and women in healthcare research and healthcare programs. And it's huge for the anthropology of our nation, so that we as a people, as a civil society, live in the truth and the goodness of our dignity and our bodily reality. So I think that's really important. And his executive order on, rejecting gender ideology and affirming the goodness and the dignity of the person, I think all of that is really important.
How does this impact healthcare in terms of your work and what you do?
Yeah, I think it impacts healthcare. What we've seen under the prior administration, under the Biden administration, tragically, we had abortion mandates, we had transgender mandates where the Biden administration attempted under then Admiral Levine attempted to force medical professionals and healthcare entities to perform and facilitate and pay for so-called transgender procedures throughout the healthcare system. And we know of the harm that transgender procedures and the application of gender ideology has done to children, has done to parents, has done to families. It's enormous. The health care outcomes are disastrous for young people and for families, making gender incongruence and people dealing with gender incongruence, making their lives even more challenging and difficult. And so if we really love and care for our young people, we want what's best for them. We want true medical care, not an ideology that's going to lead them away from true wellness and true health. So I think that's really important. I'm also excited as we continue forward in this administration for a restoration of a robust defense of religious freedom for all Americans, including pro-life Americans, particularly in the healthcare system. I think we have real opportunities there. We're going to see an HHS, I believe, that is going to vigorously enforce our medical conscience and religious freedom rights, which is outstanding. I think we're also going to see a Health and Human Services and a White House that is going to encourage equal participation of pro-life medical professionals and faith-based healthcare institutions in the healthcare of our nation. I think that's absolutely outstanding, and I think we have an opportunity to continue. And we're going to talk about this actually in an event on Capitol Hill at Belmont Abbey College's Capitol Hill building this Thursday with Professor Charlie Camosi, Andrew Kubik from the Religious Freedom Institute, and myself, and I believe our Bishop James Conley from the Diocese of Lincoln, Nebraska is also going to join us. But we're going to have a conversation about the renewal of religious liberty and human dignity in the healthcare system. I think that's something that RFK Jr., the incoming likely secretary of HHS, and this president, and I believe the vice president, are all very concerned about. They see human dignity as the foundation of our country, and making sure that patients, families have their rights and their dignity respected in our healthcare system. I think we have a real opportunity to work on that with this administration. I'm very excited about that.
Talking with Lewis Brown, director of the Christ Medicus Foundation, his take on the inauguration of Donald J. Trump and the impact on the pro-life community, healthcare as well. Lewis, in terms of some other positive fallout, have you spoken to members of the medical community or different organizations outside of your own and what doctors are feeling, what those in the healthcare industry are feeling right now? Not just since yesterday, since some of these orders are actually very beneficial for those of us with similar beliefs, but since the election was such a surprise for so many people, what have they been saying?
I think it's been a huge relief. Yes, I have. I've talked to numerous medical professionals across the country over the last, 8+ weeks since the election, and it's been a huge relief. And it's not because, folks are partisan. We as Catholics, folks that are people of faith, folks that are pro-life, we're not Republican, we're not Democrat. First, we're people that believe in a culture of life, we're people that believe in religious liberty, we're people that believe in human dignity. And I think the medical community, I'm an attorney that works in healthcare and in Catholic healthcare in particular, so I'm not a medical practitioner, but work with so many doctors, physicians' assistants, healthcare entrepreneurs, healthcare policy experts, all relieved, because what we were finding in the prior administration was a crushing of human freedom, a crushing of human dignity, and an attempt to utilize healthcare as a social experiment to break down the foundation of the human person and to break down the foundation of civil society, to destroy all constraints on the human person that are God-given and that are good for us. And so I think that there's a renewal in the belief that we are now free as a people, at least the next 4 years, God willing, to really practice medicine, focus on the dignity of the person, what's really, truly good for the patient, that medical professionals are free in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of the freedom of conscience, in terms of the freedom to practice their religion, that we're not going to see pro-life medical professionals and medical professionals that are opposed to gender ideology, we're not going to see them punished. And so I think when it comes to speech, when it comes to freedom of conscience, when it comes to freedom of religion, I think, and also returning the healthcare system to be person-centered. I think medical professionals across the country, even those that are not Catholic, even those that are not necessarily pro-life, are all pleased that we are seeing with President Trump and hopefully Secretary Kennedy a return to human freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of medical conscience, freedom of religion, and a return to a person-centered healthcare system where families, consumers, patients are the ones that are making the decisions about their medical care and not the folks in Washington based on a social experiment that's opposed to the human person. So I think it's been a massive feeling of relief across the medical community, at least the medical community that I work with, and that is diverse across the United States.
Talking with Lewis Brown, Director of Christ Medicus Foundation. Now, with that in mind, which you just mentioned, which is so important, do you think that some of these health professionals will have the opportunity now or feel less threatened to really speak the truth about the human person? Because there's been so much brainwashing. And I would really think it would be great in terms of education, evangelization, to get in there and to teach these medical professionals, I mean, the reality. I mean, and this ties into abortion as well. Do you think there is more freedom now to bring in more information about this? I mean, we've got so much evidence already, Lewis, and you know this, from Europe, where these countries, and I brought this up with John Birch earlier, these countries that were way ahead in terms of doing all these horrible things with the transgender agenda, and now they've pulled back greatly, and in Great Britain, of course, have banned some of these efforts to push transgenderism. Is there an opportunity now with these new orders from the White House and this new effort to really teach the truth about the human person?
Yeah, my amazing mother, Sharon Brown, friend of yours, and my awesome mom, says that truth that is crushed to the ground will still rise up, you know, and I think the prior administration...
Her mom, smart woman.
Yeah. The prior administration attempted to destroy the truth about the human person and human dignity and, again, the biological scientific reality of sex, and that we are made male and female. That's a beautiful thing to embrace, that we are all good. And we started seeing different aspects of society with the rise of gender ideology teach young people that there was something wrong with their God-given bodies, that there was something wrong with them, teaching people to hate their own bodies, which is just tragic. And then we saw, for instance, in England, under currently a Labour government, a left-wing government, in a country that is a civil society that is very left-leaning, in a country that is essentially a social democracy, completely rejected the ideology, at least for young people. We saw the Cass report, led by one of the top medical doctors in England, Dr. Cass, say that social transitioning for young people doesn't really show any positive health benefit, and essentially reject any type of medical interventions for gender transitioning whatsoever for people under the age of 18. Then, in December, we saw the United Kingdom ban puberty blockers indefinitely. under a left-wing government in a social democracy in a country that is much more left-leaning than the United States. I mean, we've seen similar actions in other social democracies in Western Europe, far to the left. Why? Not because they're so religious, not because they're conservative, not because they're pro-life, but because the reality of the dignity of the person and the bankruptcy of gender ideology has been made so bare within society, and they actually do care about young people, that they've rejected it. We need to do the same in the United States. It's not just about gender ideology, it's an anthropological problem. A great teacher of mine, Teresa Tomeo, has been George Weigel, who is a remarkable writer
amazing.
and author. Amazing. And his biography, Witness to Hope, changed my life. The documentary on that changed my life. And I've learned so much about John Paul II from George Weigel. And what George Weigel says that John Paul II would say about the 20th century, the reason why it was so full of blood in the 20th century was because we had a fundamental misunderstanding of the human person. That communism misunderstood the human person and tried to objectify the person based on money, and we saw fascism attempt to objectify the human person based on the power of the state. Both are evil, and both are wrong, and both are deadly for human dignity and for civil society. We're seeing the same thing with the gender ideology. It's a misunderstanding the human person that objectifies the person and teaches people to hate their own bodies. And it's a welcome thing to see the Trump administration come in and just completely reject that. Abortion is really evil, and it's a preeminent issue that we have in the United States, social issue. But there's something about gender ideology that gets to something that's almost just as fundamental. And it's important that we reject that as well and have a true anthropology of the human person that impacts law, health, education, so that human beings can really flourish, that we can have true health and well-being, and that people can meet the highest aspirations that the Lord has given them. That's the opportunity that we have.
Louis, thanks so much. The website is cmfcuro.com. Is there information on your event that you're going to be at later this week on that website?
Yeah, we'll put it up on ChristMedicus.org. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Louis Brown. Great to speak with you. Hope to bump into you this week in D.C. Louis is the director of Christ Medicus Foundation. We'll be right back on a Tuesday. Stay tuned.